have the best set of graduate students of anybody in the country, and I wouldn't trade any of them for those folks as graduate students. We're blessed to have variety. We're blessed to have students from all over the world, not just the United States. So I think that makes an excellent experience as we talk to them at the beginning of school. An excellent chance for those that never leave the country to still have an international experience as they interact together. So this is a good event for them to work together, to develop leadership, and to get back to the department. And we appreciate you guys for what you do. I have the privilege this evening of introducing our first speaker. Those of you that have come to the Totusek Lecture in past years, we're going to do something different this year, and we have two folks for you to learn more about Dr. Totusek. The first gentleman I met when I came here in the summer of 2013, I had a chance to go to the OCA Cattlemen's Tour in northeast Oklahoma and tour around on the tour bus. The first day I drove the car and realized that was foolish. If I was going to get to know people, I needed to park the car and get on the bus. And I found out pretty quickly that the back of the bus is where the action started, particularly with this gentleman. And if you wanted to know something about particularly northeast Oklahoma and the country up around the Big Cabin, he could tell you a lot about it. And it didn't take long before he warmed up to me, and I enjoyed visiting with him. He likes to tell stories. He knows a lot of history about Oklahoma in particular. And he invited me to come to the County Ag Agents meeting out in Woodward. And I went out to Woodward and walked in, and I'd never seen a room full of orange jackets like I saw that night. And so when it was towards the end of the program, he presented an orange jacket to the retiring president. And I went up to him afterwards and asked him where I could get an orange jacket like that. And he said, well, if you'll wear it, I'll get you an orange jacket. And I didn't wear it tonight, but I do appreciate it. He did get me an orange jacket. Some of you have seen me wear that. It usually brings some kind of comment whenever I wear that orange jacket because it is very bright. But since that time, I've also gotten to know that he's a good pitch player. And they introduced that night the winner of the pitch tournament. And so I had an opportunity as a kid to grow up with my mom. And when my dad was gone, I'd go to pitch club with her. And so I thought I could play pitch fairly well. And so I went last year and played pitch with the retirees at the County Ag Agents meeting in Midwest City. And when I got done, they actually gave me an award. This gentleman had hand-carved the award for the winner of the pitch tournament. His name is Wayne Shearhart. If you haven't met him before, you're going to get to this evening. Wayne Shearhart and his wife Pat are with us. And I'll let him tell you about his relationship with Jarold Callahan, our other speaker this evening. But there's a relationship there. And Wayne is going to talk to us about his recollection of Dr. Totusek. He was on the livestock judging team here at Oklahoma State in 1958, the year that I was born. And talks about some of the things that they did as a team and a little bit of his recollection of Dr. Totusek as his coach and mentor. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Wayne Shearhart.
Thank you, Dr. Rusk. Well, I really appreciate the chance to visit, talk about Dr. Totusek and this whippersnapper up here in front. Anyway, wasn't the steaks good tonight, guys?
Yeah.
They were so much better than I had a friend sitting in a cafe the other night, and I walked in to eat, Pat and I did, and I said, what do you have? And he said, a ribeye, I think. And he held this brown looking thing up on his fork. I said, what do you mean, you think? He said, well, we're trying to get the dental records on this steer so we'll know for sure. So, anyway, I wrote down some things about Dr. Totusek, and I didn't want to forget, so my old mind ain't as good as it used to be, so I may have to refer to this every once in a while. I came here in 1958 and met him. I'd met him before on judging deals and so forth, and he was our coach, and I'll tell you some stories about that a little bit later. Well, one of the first things you notice about him is that he was always well dressed, always had a tie on. Gerald's got a tie on tonight too. And he was soft spoken. In fact, later years I got so hard to hear and I had trouble talking to him on the phone. I could talk, but I couldn't hear him. Very, very humble. And one of the things that sorted out real quick, he was a visionary. He saw things down the road that a lot of us never even thought about. A family man. He had time for his family, and Clint and I was visiting at supper that being wife and a family of a judging team coach is pretty tough. So it's something else. And Dr. Todd had a real sense of humor and always kept things lively. He was also a people person and knew how to deal with people high up on the chain and down low. He was also in charge, if he was in charge. You all know what I mean. Another thing, he could pick the right person for a job, whatever it might be here on campus or somewhere else. And he got a lot done. And I'm very proud to say that he was a friend, my friend. So, very good. Anyway, on the judging team, I was fair on reasons, but one time we judged a bunch of beef cattle, and I got done, and he said, I need to visit you a little bit. I said, okay. He said, you don't really believe what you just told me, do you? I said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I said, I was raised on a cow-calf deal on the farm. We milk cows, we run steers on wheat and grass. And I said, Dad wouldn't drive by one of them dwarfs. Tall. You remember back in 1958, we had belt buckle cattle. You could see the guy's belt buckle above the cow's or critter's back. Everybody remember that? They didn't work, and they wouldn't make any money, and we was doing it to make money. So, anyway, he said, well, I'll tell you what, I got a suggestion for you. Why don't you place those cattle and then ride them down backwards? That worked pretty good. You know, when they moved over here from the old animal science arena, they lost our team picture. I don't know whether it was on purpose or not. We didn't do real good, but we had a lot of fun. And I thought Dr. Totusek was getting even with us a couple of times, and this is the truth. He sent 5 of us to Enid to the district show one spring to take reasons and conduct the judging contest. Well, it was a pretty nice day. It's cloudy and it's predicting a little snow. So we go west we didn't have the interstates in. We go west on 51, we turn north, and it starts snowing. I ain't talking about little flakes. I'm talking about snow. We hadn't gone a mile north, and you couldn't see. I'm riding shotgun, so I roll the window down in Pete's car, and I said, Pete, you're just about off the road. So I drove him all the way north till we turned west. Then it was his turn, because I didn't want to leave that window open and all the snow come in. About 2 miles after we turned west, we found a car parked the way off the road. 2 old ladies in it. So I'm one of the littler ones of the bunch, so us 5 pushed them back up on the road and sent them east. That's where they was headed. So we get to Enid. They went in and had a contest, but it was about 30 inches of snow, and we didn't get home for 2 days for meeting. And I think between us we had $6, so it was a little tough. I thought he got even with us, but not quite. He sent us to the Tulsa Fair in October. Well, it had come a rain and had floods, and we didn't have the interstates again, so we took off down through there, and we come to a place just on the west side of the river in Creek County. And for about a mile across there, it looked like it was about 3 foot of water. You could see the markers and the mailboxes, but that's about it. Well, if we'd have gone back and went north, we'd have been about 2 hours late. So Pete said, all right, we're going through this. So as the water rolled up over the hood, he put the windshield wipers on, and we stayed in the middle of the road, got foot, and it didn't kill the car. I wouldn't have believed it. Anyway, that's one of them wonderful deals. Totusek was a good friend indeed, and he got me my first job. It was working for S&C Commission Company at Oklahoma City Stockyards. I thought it was a real opportunity for me because I pretty well knew the production side of the thing, but marketing was another deal. And now this was in the spring, May 31 of 1960. That's before they had the auction. There was private treaty. And what that meant was that the cattle were sorted or bunched as best we could, and the steer salesman or the cow salesman or the bull salesman sold cattle out of the deal as the people come in at 8 o'clock, started at 8 o'clock. And my job was to sort out the ones that had sold and take them to the scale and weigh them to the people that bought them. Now, that sounds real simple. I got news for you. That's a training session you won't forget. And the day I went to work on that Monday, we had 4,000 cattle. A yard had 20-something thousand. And we had cattle in the railroad pens and everywhere else. And we got done about 6 o'clock the next morning, just in time to start again. I didn't even get home for a week working down there. The other thing that was good about it was I started work, I weighed 205. 2 weeks later, I weighed 181. It worked pretty good. But it was a good training session. We had a lot of fun and learned a lot of things. The other thing that Dr. Tot did after I went to work down there, he'd send classes down there for me to tour through the yard and take them through Wilson's plant. Wilson and Armour both had a plant down there, but Wilson let us go through. And so that was entertaining and interesting too. One thing about when we sold cattle down there, that bulls was always the last thing that sold. And on the private treaty deal I'm talking about. And there was 3 old bulls that went back to the country. People bought them, and so a year later they come back. And the first old bull said, "Boy," he said, "I had it rough." He said, "They throwed me in with a bunch of old cows, and the rock ground was rough, but he said, had good pasture and had good water, but boy, that's tough." And the second one said, "Well, I had it a little tough too. My pasture to water was a long ways apart and grass was short, but I was with a bunch of heifers." And the third bull said, "Guys, you don't know what tough is." He said, "I had good pasture, a lot of shade, and young heifers." And they said, "Well, that's not tough." He said, "Yeah, what was tough?" Said, "This steer kept following me around talking about his operation." The other thing that was interesting while I was working at Oklahoma City Yards, Totusek never missed spring show at Oklahoma City. Well, and I think it was 61 or 62, they used or had crossbred class for the first time ever. And a Smoky Charlet won the crossbred and won the grand champion steer. Well, I'm standing there just tickled to death. Pretty good steer. And I hear somebody say, "I guess you like that old big plain steer, don't you?" And it was Dr. Totusek. He was behind me. The other thing that I got to help him with over the years was his summer tours. And I know some of the faculty was not looking forward to his summer tours. I got that message. But he'd take a bus tour and go through different deals. And I got to help him put together 2 or 3 of those tours. But the one that really I remember, and some of you may remember too, is the bus broke down on Highway 40 between Okemo and Henrietta. And guess who he calls? He calls me, because there's a bus company right there pretty close to where I work. Got on the bus in about 2 hours, so it wasn't bad. I was tickled to death that he called me. The other thing that Dr. Tot helped us with, he was a strong extension supporter. And after Oklahoma City, I jumped around 2 or 3 jobs, and then I wound up being an extension agent for 34 years. And one of the first 4-H members I had was sitting up here in the front row right here. That's back a long time ago, Jarold. I've had a lot of good ones. I've had some wasn't so good, but he's a good one. Dr. Tot was always good about helping us put together a program that would fit the situation and help people understand what was going on and help them in their big project, because he was known for being able to do that. Back in '83, Kent Barnes and I put together the OK Steer Feed Out program and came up to talk to Dr. Totusek about the guidelines and what he thought. He had some staff members here and at the time, and we talked about it and changed some things and went on and did that the fall of '84. It is still going. Up to now, we've we've processed and got information on a little over almost 10,000 head of cattle from 372 producers in 14 other states besides Oklahoma. So this thing works. While Jarold was executive director of OCA, he came to me about putting together a program for the junior members. I don't know what year it was, I don't remember. And so we did, and it's still going, and it's processed about 4,000 head of cattle so far. So it's worked real good, and Dr. Tot was strong on that because at this point in time, we had got a lot of influx from Europe, and we had belt buckle cattle again. The only difference was you could see the people's belt buckle underneath the cow's belly. When he retired, his wife Nell was good enough to give me some pictures, snapshots of the family and him over the years. And so Phil Pratt and I made slides of them and presented it at the county agents deal, because he always came to our county agents meetings, and presented that deal and shocked him because he couldn't imagine Nell giving anybody pictures like that. I also carved him a steer and mounted it on a piece of wood out of the old animal science building. So it was an honor to work with him. And then he told me when I was getting ready to retire, he called and told me, he said, now you need to have something to do when you retire so you stay busy. So I thought, okay. So we worked on the judging team reunion deal on Friday night, and now that's turned into the gala, so that worked. But after I retired, I'd had a lot of years of dealing with people. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to stay home and enjoy Pat and do a little woodwork. Well, after a while, I decided it might be good to be a Walmart greeter, because we get to see a lot of people, and a lot of people I might know. So the very first morning I'm there, this lady starts in from the parking lot with two little boys, one about like this, one about like this. And so I said, good morning, lady, how are you? What are you talking about, you old fool? This ain't a good morning. She was bad-mouthing those boys, telling them about how bad they were, and they weren't worth the air, the water it took to keep them alive, and all of that. And I said, you've got a pair of nice-looking boys there, ma'am. Are they twins? She said, well, you old dummy, no, they're not twins. See, there's a difference in them. I said, well, I didn't think you'd find anybody sleep with you twice. Anyway, the big hand is past where I was supposed to quit. I've enjoyed it, and thank you. I appreciate coming and visiting and eating that good steak. Thank you, guys.
Keynote speaker tonight, and I will be brief because Wayne Shearhart is a tough act to follow. But tonight's speaker grew up in Welch, Oklahoma, went through this program in the 70s. First made a name for himself as an instructor, department head, and coach of livestock judging teams at Northeastern Oklahoma A&M. I see several of us in the audience tonight that Jarold actually worked with on teams. We've got Kim Brock over here to my right. Kim, you were on the first team that Jarold coached at NEO, is that right?
Gosh, it's been a while, Jarold.
80, 90 years ago, I think. Dr. Totusek himself recruited Jarold back here in the early 80s, and Jarold came here and worked 9 or 10 years as an instructor. He supervised the purebred beef herd and earned further fame as a coach because he had folks like Tom White on his livestock judging teams here. And I looked around, I don't see anybody else that Jarold actually coached, but I myself was on that team with Tom. Jarold left here in the early 90s. He became executive vice president of the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Association. Spent a few years there, and Bob Funk got him to go to Express Ranch close to 20 years ago. And they have become the largest seed stock vendor in North America in that time. Jarold is a person a lot of us have a great deal of respect for. He's been very successful, kind of a visionary in terms of anticipating what's going to happen and being ahead of the game. Jarold, you probably think I'm going to tell an embarrassing joke about you, but we did that at supper, so it's all yours, buddy.
Well, thank you. Wayne is a tough act to follow, and I think my first 4-H experience with Wayne was I was in the dress review down in Veneta. He was working in the Craig County office, and that's where, as Mark said, that I grew up. When they called me about speaking about this, the Totusek Lectureship, it's pretty humbling, and I usually, for those that know me, I usually don't get too nervous about being in front of a group of people, because I've always figured I could kind of, as Kim Brock would say, BS my way through it. But it's pretty humbling. I think they had to wait until all the people that I actually had as instructors had retired. And I think Bob Kropp and Bob Wedeman and Don Wagner. And I never had a class from you, Dr. Horn. You were here. So they waited until everybody that I had a class from had retired from the faculty here. And so it's good to see all of you. A lot of friends in the audience. But I think that Dr. Totusek had a tremendous impact. He had a tremendous impact on me. I think he had a tremendous impact on the livestock industry, as Wayne said. I think he had a far-reaching effect across the United States. As Wayne said, he was a devout family man. He met his wife when they were in high school. Of course, Dr. Tot was Czechoslovakian. One of the really funny stories, when we were at the American Royal one year, this contest superintendent said, "I want to introduce my very, very good friend, Dr. Robert Totusek." And being on the judging team in college, when that guy said that, we all burst out in laughter. Of course, Dr. Tot was there recognizing the 20-year team, which had been the 1955 team with Glenn Cantrell and others. But he was very proud of his heritage. He and Nell were married for 66 years. They had 3 wonderful children that were all very successful, Don, Diane, and Darla. I think what Tot was all about was commitment to excellence. Whatever he was involved in, whatever he was about, whatever you were working on with him, he wanted it to make it the very best. And at times, he was frustrating to work with. For me, you know, sometimes I was a little prone, and probably still am, to be shoot, ready, aim. And Dr. Tot at times could be aim, aim, aim some more. Then you get ready. Then you go back and maybe aim again. And you might finally shoot. And he wouldn't let you shoot until he was ready for you to shoot. And I can tell several stories about his guiding me on some paths that he didn't think I should. But he was very instrumental. And as an undergraduate here, he was a member of the 1948 national champion team, where he was the 3rd high individual at Chicago. On that, on his right, is E.J. Turman, who they were here for many, many years together. And all of you know that E.J. served as departmental coordinator, I think was his actual title at the time. That's Glenn Bratcher on his right. Tot was also on the Meach judging team here under Dr. Walters. He went through he got his PhD, MS and PhD at Purdue in 4 years, and rejoined the faculty here in '52. And he coached the judging team when he first got back here. He was on the faculty for 38 years, and the last 14 of which he served as department head from 1976 to 1990. And during his tenure, a lot of things happened. I think the faculty probably, Dr. Wagner probably had the most faculty members at that time. We had a little oil boom. I think about the time I came, and shortly thereafter, we got up to 44 faculty members in animal science. And my memory might be a little off. The new animal science building that we're in now was finished during that period of time. The animal science arena that now bears his name, the Totusek Arena. Did a lot of renovation to the teaching herds. He started the equine program during his tenure. And so there was a tremendous amount of new programs and new facilities during that time frame. And we all know that in academia, that funding allows some people to appear heroic in terms of what they get done, and sometimes it isn't. He authored over 200 publications. I think I read somewhere where it was either authored or co-authored 214. He taught over 5,000 students. He had 14 different courses he taught. Earlier today, I had the privilege of talking to the Cal-Kef class, And the class that I remember them teaching, it was the last semester that I know of that he taught it, was in the spring of '76 before he became department head, was beef production. And he was very, very, very conscious about wanting to get you as much real world experience and contact as he could. And so his field trips were legendary. One of his field trips, he loaded everybody up on the Greyhound buses and you went to the feedlots, and it was mandatory. And Dr. Armbruster actually, as he was becoming department head that year, Steve actually came in and taught quite a bit of that last course in the nutrition deal. I remember that. Isn't that amazing? And so he would take every student to the front of the bus and talk about career development, what they were going to do, what needed to be better in the department, what was their likes and their dislikes. He also took them to the OKC stockyards, toured Hereford Heaven, both Angus and purebred in south central Oklahoma, and he went to commercial cow-calf and Osage. You had to make the feedlot trip in 2 of the other 3. And the hands-on was very important to him. The curriculum, the options, that most of them around today. During his tenure, the livestock merchandising option. A big change was the business option and the amount of econ. When I graduated from OSU, none of us animal science ever had to take accounting. None of us had to take business law. Not all the faculty were 100% in agreement of that, because most of the faculty had been trained in animal science. And in Totusek's own way, he brought graduates back. We had a big meeting in one of the rooms, may have been this one, I can't remember, and listened to former graduates critique the department. And of course, all of them were somewhat critical of the fact that they had graduated with no business courses or very limited business courses, hence the business option. And so there was a lot of curriculum changes during that period of time. Dr. Horn split up the 3-hour beef production course into cow-calf, purebred, stocker, feedlot. And so I think he was very innovative. Totusek's youngest, Darla, went to Harvard and got an MBA. And so he became all about case study as well. I think we all remember that was on the faculty. And he was a big proponent of that and wanted that applied to as much of the teaching as could be. Wayne already talked about it, the infamous faculty tours, where Charlie McPeak's main focus was to see how much beer we could get on the back of the bus. And it did break down that time. And what was always fascinating about those tours, he believed in them. He was passionate about those tours. So I was going to get out of one of those one year. And one of the things that he would always talk about the tours, that a lot of the faculty were not native Oklahomans. And he wanted to get the people out that were doing research and extension. He wanted to get them out with the constituency. He wanted to talk to the producers, the manufacturers, and everybody involved in the lending. And he thought that was important to get the faculty to blend. So I'd been here a few years, been on quite a few of those faculty tours. So I go down to his office one day and I said, you know what, Todd, there's some things I could be doing here. And, you know, most of the places you're going on this tour I've been to. Thought I had the perfect excuse, but I did not get out of the faculty tour that year or any year. Neither did almost anyone else. But what was always ironic, it was also, Dean, about the same time that the legislature was wrapping up their final week in session. So consequently, it was that time of year when you knew what funding was going to be for the experiment station, for the college. And so the dean would send after him. I don't know, it happened several times when I was here, Don, and I know it happened 2 or 3 times. One time we was way down in southeastern Oklahoma, and he wouldn't get to finish the tour, much to his chagrin. Teaching herds. You know, one of the things that I really think makes OSU Animal Science Department still stand out nationally has been the fact that they have kept purebred teaching herds. It's always been discussed, can they be more greatly utilized? And probably the answer is yes, everything can be more greatly utilized. But the fact that OSU has kept and has continued to have purebred teaching herds in dairy, in beef cattle, in swine, in sheep, in horses, has been a tremendous recruiting advantage for this department nationally. It's talked about as you travel across the United States. As you go to the American Royal, as you go to Louisville, you go to Denver, a lot of kids that has an impact on them and makes them want to attend this school here. And Tot, through tough times and good, was always a very big supporter of those teaching herds and making them as good as money allowed. He was very, very big in terms of recruiting faculty. He was very patient when it came to hiring faculty. You could be pretty short-handed, and if he didn't think he had the right person, you stayed pretty short-handed until he thought he had the right person. Scholarship funds, Animal Science, Alumni Association, Animal Science Banquet. You can kind of group all those into one. When I was a student here and went to Animal Science Banquet, and I was president of Block and Bridle, and we had a very, very nice banquet. Dr. Hillier was department head. There was a few scholarships. The Turtle Lot, well, there was a few. But under his tenure, the Animal Science Banquet grew into something that was a little bit overwhelming in terms of the size, the scope, the number of scholarships. And that, in conjunction with the Alumni Association and all the work that Kim Brock and Tom White and others that preceded him, Dr. Joe Hughes, have done, have made this a great big family. And the animal science faculty, one of the modern day heads of that, I think, was Dr. Tot, because he was very diligent, very dynamic. And it really didn't, money raising really didn't fit his personality, but he became adept at it. He actually knew how to get it done. If he was uncomfortable doing it, Wayne, he would find somebody that had the contact, that had the association with that person, and he's been very instrumental. And it's one of the reasons why this department, I think, is the biggest on campus, is the amount of scholarship support. It certainly attracts students, and I think a lot of those efforts back in the 70s and into the 80s that Dr. Wagner and others have continued have made a tremendous impact. The Animal Science Banquet, I actually chaired that 2 years in a row, which he broke one of his rules. He said you'd only had to do that 1 year, and I've told this before. I chaired it 2 years in a row, and I decided to leave Oklahoma State because there wasn't any damn way you were going to make him happy on the Animal Science Banquet. It didn't matter how fast the kids went through. It didn't matter what the food was. He was always, you're going to have a post wrap-up. I don't know how many post wrap-ups. So we couldn't get the student union to do the steaks right, and he was embarrassed. So what do? I get a hold of D. Allen Went, Ardmore, Oklahoma. We buy CAB steaks. We have D. Allen Went cook them to bring them in, because he was literally a perfectionist on that. Excellence. He demanded it, and he took it very, very serious, and it was not the committee that you wanted to serve on if you were a faculty member. Trust me. Judging team support. Tremendous. When I went to school here and judged on the 1975 team, when we got all done, true story, we got $32 if you were a member of Block and Bridle. If you weren't a member of Block and Bridle, you didn't get $32. You got nothing. You paid all your own way, all your own travel. The Animal Science Department furnished the vehicle, the coach's salary, and the coach's travel. That was the support. During Dr. Totusek's tenure, the support for the judging teams greatly increased. Even when I coached here, Tom White, it was still pretty lean at times. It still cost you some money. It's continued to get better. A lot of it is due not only to Tot, but a lot of other people really helping on it. I remember not too long after he became department head, he really helped his faculty all he could. Bob Whiteman became a Regents professor. Don Wagner became a Regents professor. You're going to have to help me. Who else? There was two more. Don Gill. Who was the fourth one? Stan Gillinan. Who? Bill Luce as well. Bill Luce. And he was very, very proud, because this department, correct me, Don, if I'm wrong, this department had 4 or 5 of the first 10?
Well, actually, at that time, We had 6 because Fred Owens was also one of them.
Fred Owens, that's
And Stan Gilliland,
Stan.
Bob Weatherman.
But I think you guys were the original 4, if I remember.
That's right.
Yeah. And so he was very proud of not only Regents professors, but then he worked very hard for endowed professorships. And of course, there's the Totusek Endowed Professorship that bears his name, that the people in the industry stepped up and raised the money and they got the matching funds from the state. Industry involvement. After I left OSU, I became the executive of the Cattlemen's. Totusek was on the executive committee there. Very, very involved in the swine industry, the cattle industry, both at the state and national levels. And one of the things that his judgment made him a desired person on about every group. Very involved in OYE. Talking about changing direction, Wayne, something that you talked about. When Totusek judged, and when he first started judging shows, and when his first teams he coached were those belt buckle teams. And then he had enough vision, enough foresight that he made Great Northern Grand in Chicago in 1969. That probably is considered in breeding cattle to be the one individual and the selection that changed the type of cattle to larger, trimmer, heavier muscle cattle. One of his contemporaries the same year, Dr. Don Good, which was a good friend of his and also a competitor for many years because he coached the team at K-State, used Conoco, which was a Charolais Angus cross steer. And as we changed type, of course, like we often do in livestock selection, we go from one extreme to the next. We kept getting them bigger. 1978 Exarban, as Wayne was talking about, somewhat elongated, pretty shallow. Continued in the early 80s. That's Dr. Calvin Drake. And Calvin isn't a very tall guy. Dr. Russ knows that. Good friend of ours. But the steers got totally out of hand. They lost their relativity to the industry as much as those belt buckle cattle had previously. So about the time I started on the faculty in '82, Oklahoma State hosted the National Steer Symposium. Had a tremendous impact in terms of changing the type and the direction of market and show steers during that period of time. Because we had had this race for larger framed, leaner, higher cutability cattle. And this was a very significant change. It was held in the student union, all of us remember. Tremendous crowd, tremendous press coverage, and did gradually start dramatically changing type selection in the cattle business. However, the breeding cattle kind of kept going. This is Dameron Line Drive. In 1988, this is after Steer Symposium, he was a 10-plus frame bull. And there's other photos that demonstrate this more vividly probably than this one, but extremely tall, extremely maybe out of touch with the cattle business. So I was intimately involved, as well as Kropp and McPeak and others, in having, along with Dr. Totusek, the National Beef Cattle Conference in 1988. And basically, we spent a lot of time on that. Dr. Kropp, who isn't here this evening, chaired that from our department. And almost every major purebred breed association was very instrumental. And out of that came the same kind of directional change that happened after the Steer Symposium. It did because of Tott's vision, his demand for it. We did see type change. And it really, those two events in terms of modern day selection that he spearheaded in both situations, because of, as Wayne said, because of his vision, has had a tremendous influence. And still yet to this day, we may be a little bit off track, but most of the cattle that we are exhibiting, whether it be show steers or whether it be breeding cattle, have greater relativity to the commercial beef cattle industry. Talk a little bit, and when Clint called me, Dr. Russ called me, he talked about how, if I could, and I don't know if I can very well, relate what I experienced and learned from Dr. Tot into what I do in the present job that I have. And, you know, I really wish I was more like Tot. I wish I had his tremendous intelligence, which I don't possess. But I do think that there are some things that he tried to teach me that I picked up part of that has greatly benefited me. Bob Funk, who I work for, founder and owner of Express Ranches, has some Totusek-like similarities. They both have a quest for excellence. They both are tireless. They both have some vision. They both are relentless in terms of pursuing what their goals are. Express Ranches, we hold 7 annual auctions, and while they may not be the animal science banquet, Dr. Wetterman, we try to make them somewhat like that. We try to make sure the food's good, the cattle look good, and the same attention to detail that Tot required and demanded, we try to do it. We have a rancher's bull sale and commercial female sale in October. We had our first Hereford production sale this fall. We have a March bull sale where we sell about 600 bulls, an honor roll sale where it features junior project show heifers. We have a bull sale in New Mexico, and then we have a grass time sale that's a combination of both purebred and commercial. We've been the largest seed stock producer according to the NCBA the last 7 years, and roughly about twice as big as the next largest one. We are ranch locations in Oklahoma. Of course, we have the R3 division east of Guthrie. The Shawnee, which was the original Angus, purchased the old B&L herd. The El Reno location, of course, Yukon headquarters. We also own part of what used to be the Wheeler Brothers Feed Yard in Watonga, which we now call Excel. And then, of course, we have a commercial ranch of 180,000 acres in Cimarron, New Mexico. And then we do a cooperative venture with Vista Farms in Alabama, where we own about 1,000 registered Angus cows with them. And then they own about 1,000 registered cows of their own. And we do all the matings, breedings. It's all of our seed stock, and then we do the marketing for them. The 2 breeds that we utilize now are Angus and Hereford, and that's a little bit about the overview. We still show cattle, we still exhibit cattle. Earlier today I said we have kind of 2 herds. We have a recreational herd and a performance herd. I say that, and I sincere in it. We have Mr. Funk likes to show. I like to show sometimes when we win. We show just at the major shows, the Royal, Louisville, National Western, Fort Worth, and the Western National at Reno. And we have been the ROV Angus Breeder of the Year the last 5 years. We've been my favorite part of showing is actually showing carloads and pens in Denver, because it really is about your breeding program, and EPDs are utilized in that selection. And it's about uniformity, consistency, and I really believe in that. And this is just on the Angus side. We've won quite a bit on the limousine side in the past, but we've had 30 grand and reserve grand championships in the yards in the last 20 years. And this is the part of showing that I really enjoy. We also have a youth scholarship program, another place that the ranch kind of parallels what Dr. Tot did here. It's awarded over $3.8 million to over 400 youth participants, and even Miss Pfeiffer, I think, has gotten some of that over the years. She's been a successful participant. It's a progressive scholarship program, so up to 5 years, the more years that they bought from us. Grand champion at the Junior National, I think, is $25,000 in terms of scholarship money. And it's awarded, while it stays there, a minimum of a 5% annual interest rate increase on a yearly basis. There's some of the champions at the National Junior Angus Show. I was asked what our breeding philosophy is, and I think it goes back to a lot of Dr. Tot's research. You know, one of his deals at the Fort Reno Experiment Station was on optimums, not maximums. And there's this one study, and I'm recalling off the top of my head, where they were trying to figure out how many Charolais cross cows they could run as compared to 100 British cows. And I think that number came out to be about 83. Then you had a difference in percentage calf crop. Steve could probably give this much better than me. But the amount of additional weaning weight that was going to have to be produced by those larger cows was a lot. In fact, it didn't work. And because you also had less reproductive efficiency. But breeding philosophy, we talked about this earlier today in beef prod, but a good bull and a great bull. A good bull is a bull that goes out and gets the cows bred, doesn't come up lame, doesn't get out, doesn't scare grandma, stays sound. And if you sell a lot of bulls to a lot of big operations, you don't want them to really remember much about your bulls. Because if they remember them, we sell to Alico in Florida, one of the really big operations. I told this story earlier today. Real exciting, really was excited to have them as a customer. They bought 38 bulls the first time. About a month later, I called down there and said, how's those bulls doing? Oh, fine. Wade Grigsby was the general manager. They're doing fine. They didn't tell me much. Called about a month later, I said, those bulls doing okay? Yeah, as far as I know, they're doing fine. Call him about 2 months later. He finally says, Jarold, he said, I'll tell you. He said, I haven't heard a damn thing about your bulls. He said, that's the best news you can have. He said, they're all branded, aren't they? I said, yeah, they've all got an EX brand on them. He said, the only bulls I hear about from the guys are the ones you're having trouble with. He said, as long as I don't hear anything, your bulls are doing great. A great bull is one that causes you no problems and adds value to your calves. I've been guilty of, as well as my crew, and I imagine many in the room, is saying, this would be a really good bull if his feet were better. This would be a really good bull if he had bigger testicles. This would be a really good bull if he wasn't so damn mean. Well, if they have any of those traits or spots, Tom, they're not a really good bull. Because a good bull is one that doesn't cause you any problems. Combination of excellence. We look for phenotype as well as EPDs. I'm a big believer in the potential that genomics have and its impact in the beef cattle industry. I've always thought that animal agriculture lagged behind agronomy. And this is a bull that we produced this year and sold in our past sale in October. And you may not be able to see it in the back, but his combination of calving ease coupled with growth, coupled with lots of marbling, big ribeye, high terminal index in terms of the bioeconomic index of dollar beef of over 209, as well as he's pleasing to the eye. And we've got big plans for this bull and high expectations. We sold part of him to a group of breeders as well as ABS. And I think as we go forward, at the bottom there you can see the genomic percentiles. I was fortunate enough to be on the Angus board and chaired Angus Genetics when we started this. And I think as we go forward and we get more and more phenotypic data, we get more confidence in the markers as we recalibrate these every few years. I think that the potential is almost unlimited within the straight-bred population for genetic advancement like we've never seen. I think what's going to be really exciting, Frank, is when we get this on respiratory, when we get this on some traits that we really need. You know, we're not too far down the road that I think we will be able to have enough phenotypic data that will know which cattle are more prone or less prone to shipping fever, to all kinds of respiratory type situations. I think we're not too far away, Dr. Wedeman, before we can actually do more things on fertility, looking at the bulls, looking at which proteins in the bull semen and how that affects fertility. And I think we're just on the edge. And then I think these traits, while they're important, that measure birth weight, growth, milk, and carcass, that we just scratch the surface. And when we get into those traits that deal with reproductive efficiency, then I think we've really got something. Dr. Wagner and Dr. Wedeman was at OQBN yesterday, that's just yesterday, at OKC West. We sat down there and we had a lively discussion about, Don kept asking me all these questions about genomics and heterosis and how that all is going to be impacted. And I think we're just scratching the surface. And I think that it's going to be a tremendous age. And I think if Dr. Totusek was still here, he would be very, very fascinated with this and how you could incorporate this into cattle selection. And I would hazard to say that Dr. Johnson, you would be utilizing this technology at the beef barn to the highest degree, because I think his expectations would be that. Of course, a genomically enhanced DPD, there's a lot of people who give this better than me. Pedigree, performance, progeny, genomic test results go into genetically enhanced DPD. And what's fascinating about this, this is the equivalent of a yearling bull who has sired no progeny, depending on the trait, as you can see to the far right. It's like he's already sired 6 to 21 calves, 22 calves, I guess, depending on the specific trait. And so it allows the buyers, the bull buyers, if they're selecting for whatever it be, whether it's Kevinese or whether it's carcass traits, they just have so much more confidence and reliability of their purchase. And when they have more confidence, they tend to pay you more. I won't buy a herd bull or use a herd bull that hasn't been HD 50K'd. There's no reason to. You know, and so I think that he would be excited about this potential in the beef cattle industry. I think he would really, really be excited. And I think that his pursuit of that would be no different. Having said all that, I still believe that there's a place for crossbreeding and a place for heterosis. You know, the problem has been is that academia, and I'm not picking on academia, some people think I do, has always promoted crossbreeding. The problem with that, to get maximum heterosis, I was taught that you need a minimum of 3 breeds. Most operations just can't function that way. They don't have the number of pastures, they don't have the discipline, the size, the resources to have a dedicated 3-breed rotational breeding program. It's just not very doable for most of them. It's not doable for hardly any of them, to be honest with you, when you work with them. They can use a 2-breed rotation. They can go buy females and breed them to a bull of a different breed. But I really think as we go forward in the future, the problem is right now in the breeding of cattle, Angus is the baseline. As Don and I and Dr. Wedeman talked yesterday, if you want low birth, rapid growth, and high carcass, I can stack Angus on Angus and I'll defy you to beat me. You can't. Not with the data. So what's happening? We're stacking Angus on Angus on Angus on Angus. As we repopulate Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico after the drought with cows, what kind of cows are predominantly coming in? Black Angus-based cows. What kind of bulls are predominantly going to get used on them? Predominantly Angus-based bulls, or I would say Angus derivative bulls. Fast forward, what happens? Since we have SNP-based parentage for the first time in the history of the beef cattle business, this breed, the Angus breed, actually has a closed herd book. There's not crossbreeding going on. They can't. With SNP-based parentage, from now forward, you have a closed herd book. When you truly have a closed herd book, what happens? What happens? Gene frequency increases. Inbreeding, which is gene frequency, increases. As inbreeding gene frequency increases, what is more likely to happen? Recessive genetic defects. It's not most likely to happen. It's inevitable that it will happen. There's no way around it. Because as you get a set population, you get them narrower as you go forward. So with that being said, I do think that maternal heterosis is going to get very important in the industry. Much more important than it is today. I think it's inevitable. Maybe after I've quit raising cattle, but I think it's almost has to happen, because I think we're seeing too much drops in fertility, embryo mortality, calf livability, and so I think it is going to happen. And it's going to be interesting as we come out of this, which breeds prosper and which breeds don't, and which ones have the gene pool. And the question that we were talking about, or have talked about several times, is the Angus derivative breeds, the breeds like Limflex and all the breeds that have mainly Angus with a little bit of what they started out with, are they going to be the answer? Or the breeds because of color like Charolais and Hereford, are they going to be in the driver's seat? I have my opinions, I'll let you form yours. But I think those are the kind of questions that create thought. I think those are the kind of questions that Dr. Tot would be thinking about. And I'm not so sure that as we see this Angus on top of Angus going on, he wouldn't be wanting to have some kind of deal on genomics and on what the future might hold with regard to cattle selection, breed composition as we go forward. Because the problem with genomics at this point, it has to have the phenotypic data to train the markers. And we don't have the phenotypic data within the crossbred population to train the markers. And so right now, genomics are at best marginally successful in terms of genomic data. Quest for excellence, where do we go from here? You know, Tot was about excellence, people, facilities, programs, customer service, his graduates, genetics, about the purebred population and the purebred herds. Don Totusek, his son, said after he passed away, visited with me, sent me a very nice memo about not getting to be here tonight. And he said when they was cleaning out his files, it was amazing, a man of his age, all of the stuff that he was still working on and all the notations that he was making. And so I think that his legacy is one of diligence, effort, and he was rewarded when he was alive with what some people consider to be one of the highest honors for somebody in the livestock industry, when he had his portrait hung at the Saddle and Sirloin Club. And in your conference room, I see that OSU has remarkably done quite well over the years, and he joined several other people from this institution in that regard. But I think in conclusion, Tot had a tremendous impact on people, and he's had a tremendous impact on the livestock industry. And certainly it was an honor for me to be one of his students, one of his employees, and a co-worker of his for many years. Thank you all very much.